Gabriel Shook was supposed to look at the chala on the table in front of him while reciting the bracha over the bread prior to the Friday night. His mother had recited her prayers over the Sabbath candles. He had been rehearsed carefully by his older brother, Marty, who had made faces and grimaced every time Gabriel messed up in practice. Marty, of course, had been saying the Hamotzi for several years. Now it was Gabe's opportunity. He knew the prayer, having learned it at Sunday school, but nevertheless felt a bit concerned about saying it for the first time in front of his parents. He also didn't want to see his brother making faces at him. Since Marty was seated across from the chala, Gabe was forced to look out the dining room window as he spoke. That's probably why, in mid-prayer, Gabe saw something flash by the window. The afterglow of the early autumn sunset could not overshadow the bright object that burst by and illuminated the whole dining room. Everyone at the table stopped and then turned toward the window. Gabe halted his prayer and stared. "What was that?" Marty gasped. "Finish the prayer," his father ordered calmly. "Hamotzi lechem min hahoretz," Gabe said as quickly as possible. His father dutifully passed around a piece of challah for each of them. The boys gulped, their parents deliberately chewed slowly. "Now we will go," Mr. Shook announced. Marty was the first one out the living room door. They stood on the porch. Off in the distance, beyond the trees, there was a faint glow. Neighbors were already in the street, staring off in the direction of a strange gleam, which seemed to reach up faintly, like a distant burning candle, toward the darkening sky. "Hey, Marty, come on," yelled John Robinson, a teenager who lived 2 doors down. "We're going to look." Marty glanced at his father. Mr. Shook seemed to be thinking. His jaw was stiff, the subtle indication the boys knew well he was going to say no. "Abe," Mrs. Shook said, "it'll be all right. The people here have been very nice. They know this area. I'm sure there's nothing dangerous." "It's a big forest," Mr. Shook said. They knew what he meant. The family had recently moved from urban Long Island to tiny Evanstown, Georgia, a rural community surrounded by mountains and endless trees. It was also about to become home to a factory that would produce the backings on costume jewelry. Mr. Shook's father owned the business and had sent his son to check out the environment, the laws, and available manpower. They had only been there about 3 months and were still intimidated by the thick forests and high crags around Evanstown. John shone his flashlight toward the Shook's porch. "Come on," he called again before turning and heading down the side street that led into the trees. At least 4 other people, including 1 adult, were with him. Marty couldn't wait, neither could Gabe. "It's okay, Dad," Marty shouted as the boys sprinted down the street. Behind them, Mrs. Shook put her arm around her husband's shoulders. He quickly said a prayer. The boys caught up with the small band under a streetlight. They recognized their companions. Besides John, there was Rennie Halcombe, who was 12, his sister Jen, 7, and their mother, Sue. They lived 3 doors down from the Shooks. In a moment, the 6 of them were joined by Kellen Bear. McLeod, a tall, rangy boy who was also an experienced camper and lived nearby. After generously helping fix Mr. Shook's car, which had an overheating radiator, he had regaled the Shook brothers one afternoon with tales of his long hikes through the Smoky Mountains, a confrontation with a large black bear, and his ability to cull bits of food from the demanding countryside. Marty almost gave an audible sigh of relief when he saw Bear, who came equipped with 2 very large electric lanterns that shoved the darkness back as though rolling up carbon paper. Gabe, on the other hand, simply stayed close to his brother. Marty was only 13, just 4 years older, but his recent bar mitzvah seemed to add an aura of authority to his frail shoulders. The night was very quiet, as though the raccoons, bears, deer, and opossum had suddenly vanished into lairs. The usual owls, whose hooting had startled and frightened Gabe the first time he heard them, had grown silent. Even the wind made little noise as it sifted across the mountain slopes and through the long boughs of the endless trees. Overhead, the stars were starting to emerge. A crescent moon tiptoed across the horizon. "Rennie, stay close," Mrs. Halcombe ordered nervously as the group reached the end of the small street. The road stopped right at the edge of the woods, then became a path that zigged and zagged around the high pines, maples, and other trees before vanishing into the darkness beyond. Bear volunteered to lead the way simply by walking from the back of the group to the front without saying anything. He was taller than anyone in the group, with an easy gait that reflected his confidence. He stepped from the paved road onto the rocky path smoothed by hundreds of boots across many years. The Halcombe dog, a basset named Wayward, sniffed at his feet. Behind him, in single file as the path narrowed, came everyone else. Gabe and Marty settled into the middle. Sue Halcombe and her daughter lagged just a little behind. "It was a large orange ball," John said. "I saw it so clearly. It was round and burning and everything." "We all saw it," Bear said with an authoritative tone in his voice. He held up his hand. They waited. Gabe could barely breathe, his ears strained to hear anything. Some leaves moved as Mrs. Halcombe and Jen inched closer to the group. Then that too ended. There was a sense of a complete nothingness, as though all of them had been swallowed up by the trees. "Nothing," Bear noted, almost to himself. Everyone nodded. "The forest keeps its secrets well," the teen observed solemnly, his head cocked to gather any sounds. Bear's voice seemed so loud amid the silence. His beacons illuminated the area around them, but the trees had become a black wall just beyond the edge of the light. Everything was dark and sinister, almost overwhelming. Gabe sidled closer to his brother. Somewhere, something flitted along nearby branches. Gabe felt a shiver slide down his spine. He strained to see anything in the blankness. Night had fallen too hard and too fast. Everything was dark. He felt the cooling air brush against his bare arms. He should have gotten his coat, he thought. However, the idea of going back alone did not appeal to him. He did not feel very safe, but knew he didn't have the courage to return by himself. Bear suddenly pointed. They followed his long finger. In the blackness between the trees, they could see a faint glow. They could not figure out what it was, but it was definitely there. Wayward barked once, but seemed to content to tag along with the humans. He didn't have a leash on. Few dog owners in Evanstown tied up their dogs. "What do you think it is?" Mrs. Halcombe asked. "A plane crash," John asked. "Maybe," Bear said. He twitched his lips thoughtfully. Bear had recently decided not to shave, perhaps in hopes of looking older. As a result, his cheeks were slightly grizzled, and there was faint outline of hair on his upper lip. The reflected light from his beacon simply revealed how little was really there. His attempt to appear thoughtful ended up making him look silly, like a little boy with his face contorted when someone asks what should be an easy question. "Bring your rifle," Rennie want to know. "No," Bear admitted. He straightened. "I didn't think I'd need it," he said firmly. He glanced around. "Are we all ready?" "I think we should say a prayer first," Mrs. Halcombe said. "If there were a plane crash, people may be hurt." She hugged her children and held them close to her. Everyone closed their eyes. Mrs. Halcombe whispered something under her breath. Everyone else did the same. Gabe shut his eyes and tried to think of something appropriate. Nothing came to mind, so he whispered the prayer over bread repeated so hastily not that long before. "I think we're ready now," Mrs. Halcombe said finally. Gabe agreed, although he felt his heart pounding so fast that he was sure the sound was audible. He felt chilled and hot at the same time as his mind raced through various possibilities. Could it be a plane crash? What if it were a meteor? What if the forest caught on fire? Maybe it was a space satellite, a secret satellite that no one was supposed to know about. Maybe it was a rocket ship. He was still running through the options, each one sounding more exciting than the last, when Marty began to walk away with the others. Hastily, Gabe followed suit. Maybe, he thought, an alien ship had crashed. Wouldn't that be something? The topic was fresh in his mind because of the recent report that a rock retrieved from the planet Mars might contain evidence of life. Could there be aliens on other planets? He had asked Rabbi Arnold after reading a newspaper story in class about the Martian rock. There was no synagogue in Evanstown, so the family drove the 45 miles to Marion every Sabbath and stayed over for Sunday school. The rabbi had paused. "What do you think?" he asked. "I guess so," Gabe decided. "Your guess is good enough for me," the rabbi said. "Would they believe in God?" Gabe continued. That was something he had thought about since reading about the rock in his newspaper. "Where is God?" the rabbi wanted to know. He had a twinkle in his eye that Gabe recognized. The rabbi knew the answer. "Everywhere," Gabe finally replied. If he is everywhere, the rabbi continued, then would he be among the aliens? I guess so. Rabbi Arnold patted Gabe's head. I guess so too, he said. Gabe thought of that brief discussion as he brushed aside small twigs that reached across the path and stepped through old leaves that crunched underfoot. It was nice to think that God was around him now. He had never been so scared. The trees all seemed so dangerous, with gnarly bark filled with ominous, glaring eyes. The wind shook the branches, creating a sense of waving, menacing arms looming all around him. The others in the small band seemed unconcerned, but marched steadily on behind Bear's bold leadership. Gabe found his legs unwilling to keep pace. Instead, he stumbled over an occasional exposed root, tripped on a pebble, and staggered against the brush extending from the side of the path. Every step brought them closer to the glow in the woods. Every step increased his fear. He grabbed Marty's arm. I want to go back, he whimpered.